Today I'm going to answer another one of your questions. Came to me in the comments, and it's about paper, more specifically how to deal with cockling when painting wet in wet, so that the paper buckling up. So if I was going to use a loose sheet like this, I'd just tape it straight to the board just with some masking tape and dry it with a heat gun. Another method you can use, especially with loose sheets, if I was going to do like a half sheet or a full sheet, then I'd just soak it first, so completely soak the paper and then tape it to the board with some gummed paper, the type that you have to wet first, and then allow it to fully dry, and then that would give like a nice kind of like almost drum tight paper surface to work on. And now my preferred method really, when just especially when working on slightly smaller sizes, is to use a block like this. And you can see it's sheets of paper that are glued together around the outside, kind of like a soft kind of gum type glue. That's the cold press block there, 9 by 12 inches. This is a rough surface one. Because it's gummed around the edge, when you wet it, it just doesn't buckle as much. So it's nice and easy to use. And there's a small sketch I did, just plein air, and not sure if you can see there, it's kind of like a little groove where there's no gum around the outside, and you can just take a palette knife and then remove the top sheet, and then there's another sheet ready to go underneath. There's a slightly smaller one, 7 by 10 Saunders Waterford, that I quite like to use. And I'm going to get on and just do a quick demo. And I think I'll use the rough surface, 100% cotton. It's made by Meaden, and they send me this paper very kindly to test out, and I really like it. It's a bit cheaper than the Saunders, but performs really well. It takes the water well, and you'll see as I paint something wet in wet that it doesn't actually buckle up that much at all. And I'll just grab the mop, it's a squirrel mop brush, and I'm going to wet the surface all over before I start. So quite a lot of water, get it fairly wet, just some clean water there, and completely cover the whole surface of the paper. If I was using like a wood pulp type paper, maybe some of the cheaper papers available, doing this kind of technique wouldn't work very well because the paper would just sort of buckle up. But with it being 100% cotton and gummed around the outside, makes it nice and easy to do this technique. So I'll just grab some cobalt ultramarine and put a bit of cerulean in there as well. Just mix up a little bit of blue for a sky. I'll just just keep it very simple, I think. Just paint a nice little sky painting, and then straight in, big broad strokes there with the mop brush. And just reflect some of that down into, which I think will be a bit of a water area. I'll probably add a few boats for a bit of context. I'll just grab some of that grey and then mix some burnt sienna into that. And just bring that across for possibly a bit of a rain cloud, something. And a touch more burnt sienna into it. And a touch more ultramarine, just to darken that mix off a touch. And then you should be able to see I mean, where the paper is completely saturated and it's not really buckling up much at all. It's a tiny little bit, but once I dry that off, especially like with a heat gun, it should go back perfectly flat. And I'll just reflect some of that cloud down into the water area. I think I'm quite happy with that as a simple little sky, so I'll just dry that off. And now it's perfectly dry. You can see it's dried perfectly flat. There's no kind of cockles or creases on the paper at all. And so I'm just going to re-wet the surface slightly, just with a mist bottle. And I think I'll just turn that into maybe like a bit of a harbour type scene, a bit of a harbour wall, a couple of boats. And it's completely improvised. This is I haven't got any reference photo or anything. And I've just used some of the grey in the palette just to put a suggestion of maybe like a distant harbour wall. And I'm sort of misting it slightly with the bottle as I go, just to soften any edges. And now maybe the other part of the harbour, a bit closer, so I'll make that a bit darker. And just add a suggestion of a reflection as I go. And just give that another quick hit with the mist bottle. And just mix up some slightly darker paint, just with ultramarine and burnt sienna again. And then just darken that harbour wall off slightly. Can get away with being very kind of loose, I think, with this, because it's going to be in the distance. And again, just adding a touch of a reflection as I go. And leaving a few kind of areas unpainted that maybe suggest there's a ripple on the water. And I think while I'm just on this first wash, I'll just add a few suggestions of maybe some masts just off there in the distance slightly, and reflect those at the same time. Okay, I'll just dry that slightly. And I'm going to switch to this sable brush. I think it's a size 4 or 5. And I mix up some darker paint than before. Same ultramarine burnt sienna mix. And just along that harbour wall there, I'll just put a few kind of very kind of loose boat shapes. Not really looking for any kind of real definition. And the same on the other side. It's just a few simple shapes really, just to kind of tie it all together. And back over to the right hand side, just a few more kind of lines and simple little kind of broken line, I suppose, a little bit of lost and found edges. And just kind of tying it all together as one continuous shape in a way, I suppose. And so it's basically just a few kind of lines and dots and marks. If I had a few masked shapes, just simple lines basically, and it should kind of tell the eye really that there's some boats off there in the distance. Just a very light touch with the tip of the sable brush. And I think even though it's just very simple shapes really, it still just does give the impression that there are some boats there lined up in harbour. And I'll just pick up some of that grey left in the palette and just very simply just add some reflections. It's taken a little bit of care just to line them up. And I think now those reflections put in, it's starting to take shape and give the impression that it's a watery surface. But I'll grab some even more darker paint and I'll just add a couple of boats, just kind of in the sort of mid-ground. Still keeping fairly small. It's kind of more of a painting about atmosphere and sky and light really, more than boats. So just trying to find a very simple kind of boat silhouette. And just maybe give the impression there's tiny little bit of something going on top of that boat. Maybe it's like a rolled up sail. And I'll just bring the mast up. Not very good at doing those in one stroke really. I always end up going a little bit offline, so just a few kind of dots and dashes. And a very light touch just suggests that maybe that's a bit of rigging. And again, gone back into that sort of leftover palette grey and just loosely suggest the reflection. And then just bring that reflection of the mask straight down. Slightly wavy broken line. And I'll just go back into that dark. And I think I'll put another boat just sitting slightly behind that one. And just try and vary the shape of this boat, make it slightly different from the other one. It's quite easy when you're doing boats just to do them all the same shape, which is fine, but it's quite nice to sort of mix it up. So I'll give the impression that this one's maybe got a small cabin on it or something like that. Maybe it's like a small sailing yacht. And again, sort of broken line for a mast. And maybe this one's got one of those upright support beams. Not sure what they're actually called, to be honest. And again, back into that grey and just bring the reflection straight down. Leaving it slightly broken, so it gives the impression that there's maybe a few ripples around the bottom of the boat. And then just bring the mast straight down again. And reflection for that beam. It's looking a little bit light at the bottom of the painting there, so I think I reflect some of that sky down into the water. Just a bit of dry brush, maybe a bit of glazing as well. I'll switch back to the small mop brush, holds a lot more water, so I can just soften all of that off. It kind of helps to sort of frame the painting slightly and just makes the light areas look quite a lot lighter if you've got a bit of dark next to it. It also gives a sense that there's a bit of life going on in the water, that there's a few ripples and waves moving around. Keeping it very simple, you don't have to do too much of this. Okay, I think we're reaching the end now. I think that's probably about enough of that. I think we'll call this one done. But that's a little simple demo there, just to show you the benefits of using a block of paper. You could see that the paper was quite wet, especially for the sky wash, and although it does kind of like cockle and buckle very slightly, it always dries perfectly flat. Just a nice experience to work on, basically, so you're not having to worry about flattening paper out and re-wetting it. There's a link down in the description of this video on YouTube where you can get 10% off Mead and Art supplies, and there's a discount code in there as well. I hope you liked the video. Let me know in the comments what you think, and subscribe if you haven't already, and I'll be back again with another video next week. So until then, happy painting and bye for now.